Pro-democracy activists, meanwhile, in Hong Kong are calling for people to rise up against China's plan to impose national security legislation on the city. The controversial legislation is being seen as a direct attack on the region's autonomy. So what role can Canada play? Guy Saint-Jacques served as Canada's ambassador to China from 2012 to 2016. He's now a senior fellow at the University of Alberta's China Institute. Hi, Mr. Saint-Jacques. Good to have you back on the program.
Thank you for the invitation.
Canada, the UK and Australia have issued a joint statement on Beijing's proposed national security legislation. They say, and I'm going to quote here, they're deeply concerned. The statement says that making such a law on Hong Kong's behalf without the direct participation of its people or legislature would, quote, clearly undermine the principle of one country, two systems. Your reaction to that statement?
Well, I'm very pleased that this statement was issued. And in fact, it's important that it's a joint statement. I know that Secretary Pompeo has also issued a statement. I think that in fact, what is troublesome with this new law, it's something that should have been adopted by the local parliament in Hong Kong. In fact, there was an attempt to do that, I think, back in 1993. It was rejected because of the implications. And this time, it looks like if Beijing is hoping that the international community will be distracted by the COVID-19 pandemic and nobody will notice what they are trying to do.
What is your interpretation of what they are trying to do?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things at play here. First is that they know that they are getting to the one-year anniversary when the demonstration started in Hong Kong. They know also that every year on June 4th, there's a very large demonstration in Hong Kong to protest what happened on Tiananmen Square on June 4th, 1989. They have no clear idea how to resolve the problem. Domestically, you have also an economy in China that is not going very well. They are not back to 100% where they were before the start of this crisis. International markets are down, so that means that trade is down, and there is also the impact of the ongoing crisis with the United States. So all this means that at this time it's becoming more troublesome for President Xi Jinping and the leadership in Beijing. And traditionally, what they are trying to do in those circumstances is to try to rally the people around a national cause. In this case, all Chinese, of course, believe that Hong Kong is part of China, and they will use this, in my view, as a way to distract public attention from the problem that China is faced with at this time.
What about, and as you mentioned, the one-year anniversary of the protests in Hong Kong, or nearing the one-year anniversary, what about the possibility and the expectation to a certain degree that there will be now additional protests in Hong Kong this weekend, and the added complication, of course, of COVID-19?
Of course, because of the rules in place around COVID-19, demonstrations are forbidden in Hong Kong. But I think because of this law, and the likelihood is that the parliament in Beijing will adopt it eventually. That means that the Democrats in Hong Kong will want to react. So therefore, we could see demonstration. And it's something that has to be watched, because if there is violent repression that takes place in Hong Kong, I think that will force Western government and like-minded to decide what they want to do. In the case of Canada, of course, the relationship right now with China is very bad. But I think that if something dramatic happens in Hong Kong, Canada and other countries will have to think about imposing sanctions on China. In the meantime, again, I'm very glad that the UK, Canada, and Australia joined forces, but I think they should go a step further to say that China has to abide by the one country, two system principle, and that if they do anything dramatic in Hong Kong, there will be sanctions that will follow. In fact, they should propose that maybe a mediator should be sent to Hong Kong to try to diffuse the situation over there.
We've had you on the program many times over the past 2 years to talk about the fractured relationship between Canada and China. Is there anything great, like, is this the most pressure that Canada will face if in fact it does develop that way in Hong Kong to go further than it has in other instances?
Well, I think that we have to remember that Hong Kong is very special for Canada. We have probably around 300,000 Canadians living in Hong Kong. Therefore, if this law is adopted, if there is something dramatic that happens in Hong Kong, this will have an impact on the Canadian community. You know, you may be faced with a request to organize a massive evacuation. Of course, we already know that immigration from Hong Kong is increasing. The number of requests from people who want to come to Canada has been increasing very importantly in the last year. And so for all those reasons, we have a lot at stake in Hong Kong. I recall that Prime Minister Trudeau, the first time he went to Beijing at the end of August 2016, raised those points with the leadership in Beijing. He said it was very important for them to respect the principle of one country, two systems. He reminded them that we had 300,000 Canadians in Hong Kong. Therefore, we will always pay attention to the situation there. And in fact, the success of Hong Kong is important for the success of China. Let's remember that 70% of foreign direct investment going into China goes through Hong Kong.
Before I let you go, I just have a few more seconds, Mr. Saint-Jacques, but I wanted to know if you have any kind of update on Mr. Kovrig, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, who of course have not been able during this pandemic to have any access to consular officials or consular visits.
No, unfortunately, no recent news. And the sad thing is that they have been there for a year and a half. We will have to follow very closely what happened on May 27th, when we will have the next hearing in the extradition process of Mrs. Wang. In fact, the judge will render her decision. So it's something that will have to be watched because there could be a further reaction in Beijing if the judge were to decide that the extradition process can continue.
For sure, something to watch. Thank you, Mr. Saint-Jacques. Appreciate your time as always.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.